Okay, Shabbat Shalom. Welcome to our Sabbath morning service. It's nice to be here with you today. I wanted to announce officially that the United Israel World Union Conference, the 74th annual conference, will be here in St. Francisville the last weekend of April, April 28th, 29th, and 30th. And in order to accommodate the masses that will be coming in here, this is the last political comment I'll make. I want everyone to not think about politics today. But we expect more than at the inauguration right here. So, but no, actually, I've reserved 2 blocks of rooms, one at the local hotel here in St. Francisville and at the Best Western, and one 18 miles from right here in Zachary, a brand new hotel. It's a Comfort Inn and Suites, and I reserved 20 rooms at that hotel as well. So Anna helped me set up, actually she did it, I didn't do any of it. She set up a registration page on the website. And so what I would like for people to do, I'll post the link directly, but if you go to the website, to unitedisrael.org, you will find the link to go to the conference. It's under news and events, and you'll see annual conference. So I know that that's a little roundabout description, so I'll post a direct link, but go to unitedisrael.org, news and events. You'll see the drop down, select annual conference, and you'll simply fill it out, and you are registered. But I want everyone to register because the locals really need to know who's coming, how many are coming, so that we can make sure that your stay here is lovely and memorable. And that's one of the things that we're asking people to do. So I encourage people, these rooms won't last long. It doesn't mean that you can't find a place. You know, the old story about no room at the inn. So we don't want you to be in a manger. And so we would ask that people sign up as soon as possible if you're coming, and we encourage you to come. I want to begin today. We are in our series on Noah. And before I start, I want to tell you, last week's class was a longer reading. It was a longer reading. According to ancient sources, this triennial cycle of readings follows a rule that a lot of people may not know. So I want you to understand that it's even recorded in the Talmud that there was expected to be a minimum number of verses that each person would read. They would have 7 people called from a synagogue in antiquity, and this practice follows today, though it's not a problem under the annual cycle of readings. They had 7 readers, and each reader was required to read a minimum of 3 verses, which means that all of these ancient Sederim, these ancient divisions in the triennial cycle, had to be at least 21 verses, and most of them are a little bit bigger than that, a little bit longer than that. But in this case, today's reading, we have one that's only 25 verses long. It's a very short reading. It's succinct. It covers a singular topic, which I expect to get into a little bit today, and I am looking forward to it. So we're in the second of 3 teachings based upon the life and times of a man named Noah. This story of Noah is made up of 3 of these ancient readings. We did one last week. This is our second, and the third and final will be next week. Now, Noah, I'll do a little, a little background before I do the reading and get into the teaching. But Noah is first mentioned in Genesis chapter 5, verse 9. We learn that Noah descended from Seth's line. All you have, according to the narrative, is Cain's line, which will be ultimately wiped out in the flood. And then you have Seth's line, which I made a big deal about in the first class, suggesting that Seth's line is the line during the generation that began to call upon the name of God. So in Seth's line, Noah's father Lamech had this to say at his birth. He said, this one will console us from our doing and from the distress of our hands, from the soil that Jehovah has cursed. Now, what we learn from this, it's almost as if Lamech is prophesying that there's something about this child that will in some way bring consolation. Now, the curse on the ground is mentioned. If you remember, there was a curse on the ground, and we're going to cover that because I want to make sure that you understand that there is a connectedness, if that's a word, there is a connectedness between these ancient stories. The narrative flows. There are things that we must ensure that we bring from one story to the next in order that things begin to make sense. So you'll recall in Genesis chapter 3, after Adam and Chava partake of the forbidden fruit, there is, if you will, a judgment seated. And God is in the garden, and he is distributing justice for what's been done. He approaches the woman first. What is this that you've done? And she said, the Nakash did it. The Flip Wilson. The Nakash made me do it. And then, it just goes on down. You have the questioning of the Nakash and then of Adam. And this is the curse, or this is the scene that deals with the curse on the ground that we're going to be talking about. So it begins in chapter 3, verse 17. And so that I wouldn't have to flip back and forth, I don't have a printed copy of the Transparent English Bible, so I hand wrote this like an ancient scribe on my notes. And to the soil creature, which is the translation in the TEB for Adam, and to the soil creature, he said, because you hearkened to the voice of your woman and you ate from the tree that I charged you, saying, you will not eat from it, cursed is the soil on account of you. In distress you will eat of it all the days of your life, and thorn and thistle it will sprout for you. You will eat the plant of the field. In the sweat of your two nostrils you will eat bread until you return toward the soil, for from it you were taken, for dust you are, and toward dust you will return. So this is the meting out of a curse. It's a curse indeed on the soil. Now, whenever the soil creature, whenever the soil is cursed, the soil creature reaps that curse. The connectedness here, and a lot of these word plays that show up in the Hebrew that we sometimes lose in English translations, is apparent here. Let me make this point a little bit better. If I translate Adam as man, or Adam, if I transliterate it and just bring it over into English as Adam, you have Adam and you have the earth. The earth is cursed, doesn't really connect to Adam. But if you understand that Adam comes from the Adamah, what happens on the Adamah affects Adam. I think that in many ways, a lot of people who are religiously or spiritually or biblically oriented lose the connectedness with the earth. Remember, we are told very early on in the text that our primary purpose is what? To guard and protect the ground. Now, a lot of times I think we lose sight of that, but there is this environmentalist task that we have. I think it's very important. I think we've lost that. But just in passing, this curse that's brought on by one man, this curse enters in. The curse is on the ground, the soil, if you will. And what it brings about, and what Lamech envisions Noah helping ease, is the distress of our hands in our doing. In other words, there's this curse that was brought about, we just read about. There's a curse, and he sees in some way Noah bringing about a consolation. Somehow Lamech felt that his son would indeed bring that consolation. Now, the word Noach, as I've pointed out before, that root word Noach is related to the idea of console, to comfort, to rest. And that word occurs throughout the text. It's almost like hidden behind most of our English translations, many of which are pretty bad. But it's the same root. So the one who will console is named, in a sense, the consoling one, the comforter, if you will. The curse on the soil brings distress to our hands, but then it doesn't stop there. It doesn't stop at the garden. Nothing happens except a downward spiral. When Adam and Chava are sent forth, it literally says they are chased forth from the garden, and they're sent out of the garden. Things don't get better. It ultimately grows worse and worse. And man's bad behavior we read about all through those first several chapters, it just gets worse. It gets so bad that this description is given of mankind. I take it as mankind and not just one. It says, every shaping of the thoughts of his heart was only bad all the day. Now, the reason I want to cover this again is because we can't lose sight of how these stories are connected. So as we see the journey outwards from Eden, things grow worse. It ultimately gets to the place where it says that Jehovah was sorry that he made the man, and it made distress toward his heart. Okay? There's our word again. Now, the thing about this translation is it shows you, when you see that the word distress towards his heart, what brought distress to the hands of man was the work that was brought on by the curse. And then man's continued bad behavior, it even affected the Creator. Literally, it said that man's behavior brought about this sorrowful regret that God had even made man, and that brought distress to his heart. You see how that it's like everything is, the word symbiotic, everything is connected in a way, even with our Creator. And I think that's a powerful image. Disobedient man brought on a curse of the land. It brought distress to his hand. More bad brought distress towards Jehovah's heart until there was no remedy. You know, the writer of Kings says this about Israel. When it reached such a state of degradation, it says, you know, it's described variously in the Bible, from the sole of your foot to the tip of your head, there's no soundness. The writer of Kings says, until there was no remedy. Now, what does that mean? There's no cure. There's no fixing. This is so far bad, so far gone, that there's no way to do it over except to start completely fresh, to wipe out humanity. There's no recourse. In the writer, it says in Genesis, ultimately, that the end of all flesh has come. The end of all flesh. Genesis 6:3 from last week's class, one of the verses says this. It's difficult to, interpreting is one thing, but it says basically, Jehovah's spirit would not abide. It's like the spirit of the Creator will not abide in man. His days will be 120 years. And some derive from that from the day that was uttered, that mankind would make it another 120 years, and then the flood would come. Now, there are a lot of other different views on that. Various religious teachers will get into that. Some say, well, it means that the maximum number of years of a man's life is 120. Moses lived to be 120. Some will take that 120 and say that these are Jubilee years. That if you take 120 Jubilee years, it's 6,000 years. So in rabbinic thought, there was this idea that began to develop that the age of man, if you will, mankind would be 6,000 years, 2,000 years of chaos, 2,000 years of Torah, of instruction, beginning, like from Abraham forward. And then 2,000 years, they believe, would be what they called Yemot HaMashiach, the days of Messiah. Those are interpretations, though. You see, man had corrupted his way being God's way. What is God's way? Genesis 18, justice and righteousness in the earth. But the way had become corrupted. And then we read in Genesis chapter 6, verse 8, that Noah found favor in the eyes of Jehovah. Not because of his words. It wasn't that Noah was preaching on the street corners, as I brought up last week, but it was because every time we saw that he was charged with something, he was commanded with something, it simply said that Noah did. And Noah did. We learned that Noah was a just man. He was righteous, whole, tamim, the word tamim. He was whole in his generation, in his life cycle. That if you looked at that generation, it was Noah that found favor. And why? We have to see that it's connected to the fact that he was complete in his generation. We saw that this is not unachievable, that righteousness is not only something that's achievable, but it's commanded. For his righteousness, he found favor, and for his favor, he was saved. And all who were to him. It's interesting. In chapter 6, verse 18, which is from last week's portion, it says, "And I have made rise my pact with you." Now, we're going to talk in more detail about that as we get into the teaching today. "And I have made rise my pact with you," indicating that the act of rising, causing to stand up, causing to arise, this pact or agreement or covenant already began before the events that we're going to talk about. I'm going to put some things out there today that might be a bit challenging. I backed off already of what I thought about saying last night because I just think that we need to do a little bit more building before I come out with everything that I want to share. But the idea in 6:18 is that the covenant, the idea to establish the covenant with Noah is already in effect before the flood. Okay, remember that. But what does it mean when it says, "made rise my pact"? Made rise my pact. The Hebrew word that's translated by Tabor in the TEB as pact is the Hebrew brit. Brit. It's typically translated as covenant. Sometimes you'll see it as an agreement. And then people go wild with it. There are a lot of studies out there on covenant. And you'll see why. I'll tell you one reason why. Because the word berit occurs 267 times in the Hebrew Bible. And yes, I looked at every one of them over the last 2 days. What I was looking for was the verb associated with berit. Now, see, some of you have other things you do for fun. This is the kind of stuff I do for fun. So 267 times. I went down and I went from Genesis 6:18. And what does it say? it says, and I have made rise my pact, and I have made whatever. And I'm looking for the verb because people a lot of times will associate a covenant has to have cutting, right? I've cut a covenant. Most times if you look up the idea of covenant, you always associate it with cutting, hence blood, hence sacrifice, hence all these other things. Man, I'm wondering if anyone else has ever looked at all these occurrences. I think they have. But it occurs for the first time in the story, in the narrative of Noah. Berit occurs for the first time. Now, I pointed this out, and I sort of kind of beat around the bush, but listen, there are people who, well-meaning and very brilliant people, who will look for covenant prior to 6:18, and they'll find it in the garden. They'll say, look, this is a covenant, the Edenic covenant or whatever. You see all these names for these covenants. But it doesn't say covenant is never mentioned until 6:18. And that's not a year, I mean Genesis 6:18. The first time is with Noah. And it's mentioned 8 times in the narrative about Noah. 8 times. 3 portions, 8 times, all right there together from the time it's first mentioned. Actually, it doesn't even occur in next week's. It's only in these first 2. Between Genesis chapter 6, verse 18, and Genesis chapter 9, verse 17, 8 times. It's not going to be mentioned again until we meet with a person named Avram. Maybe you've heard of him, Abram. It's not going to be mentioned again until him. So in the last portion, in Genesis 6:18, we learned that this pact will be with Noah. Today, you'll hear a little bit more about that pact. So I want to begin today's class. I'm going to read 25 verses, beginning in Genesis 8:15, going to Genesis 9, verse 17 from the Transparent English Bible. And most of you know this by now. If you're new, welcome. Shalom, peace to you. Understand that we have a Facebook page for those of you who do Facebook. And each week I post up the section of text from the Transparent English Bible that we're going to be going through. So here we go. It's very literal. And Elohim spoke toward Noah, saying, go out from the vessel, you and your woman and your sons and the women of your sons with you. Every living thing that is with you from all flesh, among the flyer and among the animal and among the moving thing that moves about on the land, go out with you, and they will swarm in the land and bear fruit and be abundant upon the land. And Noah went out, and his sons and his woman and the women of his sons with him. Every living thing, every moving thing, and every flyer, everything that moves about upon the land, according to their families, went out from the vessel. And Noah built a slaughter place to Jehovah, and he took from every clean animal and from every clean flyer, and he made going up things. We'll have to talk about that. On the slaughter place, and Jehovah smelled the soothing smell, and Jehovah said toward his heart, I will not add to treat lightly still the soil on account of the soil creature, for the shaping of the heart of the soil creature is bad from his youth. And I will not add still to strike every living thing as I have done. Still all the days of the land, seed and cutting and cold and heat and summer and winter and day and night will not cease. And Elohim blessed Noah and his sons, and he said to them, bear fruit and be abundant and fill the land. The fear of you and the terror of you will be upon every living thing of the land and upon every flyer of the skies, with everything with which the soil moves about, and with every fish of the sea. Into your hand they are given. Every moving thing that is living, to you it will be for an eatable thing, as the green plant I've gave you. Now all. Only flesh with its life breath, its blood you will not eat, and only your blood of your life breaths I will seek out From the hand of every living thing I will seek it out, and from the hand of the soil creature, from the hand of a man his brother, I will seek out the life breath of the soil creature. The one who pours out the blood of the soil creature, by the soil creature will his blood be poured out. Because in the image of Elohim, he made the soil creature. And you bear fruit and be abundant, and swarm in the land and be abundant in it. And Elohim spoke toward Noah and toward his sons with him, saying, and I, look, it's me, am making rise my pact with you and with your seed after you, with every living life breather that is with you, among the flyer, among the animals, and among every living thing of the land with you, from all going out of the vessel to every living thing of the land. And I've made rise my pact with you, and all flesh will not be cut off still by the waters of the flood, and there will not be again a flood to ruin the land. And Elohim said, this is a sign of the pact that I'm giving between me and between you, between every living life breather that is with you, for life cycles, age lasting. My bow I've given in the cloud, and it will be for a sign, a pact between me and between the land, and it will be in my making a clouding of a cloud upon the land, that the bow will be seen in the cloud, and I will remember my pact that is between me and between you, between every living life breather among all flesh, and the waters will not become still a flood to ruin all flesh. And the bow will be in the cloud, and I will see it to remember the pact, age lasting, between Elohim and between every living life breather among all flesh that is upon the land. And Elohim said toward Noah, this is a sign of the pact that I have made rise between me and between all flesh that is upon the land. Our narrative contains some information about just what a pact is. Now, what I'm going to ask for is for people to consider what I'm saying carefully, because you might have a tendency, and I do as well, because I just told you I went through every occurrence to look at every occurrence of the word berit. You're going to be thinking, yeah, but there's this. What about this verse? What about this verse? What I want to try to create with this study is a fresh revealing of ideas and concepts and things, so that all of us who think we have it figured out will build one concept upon another. So what I want to deal with, and I want to deal with this very carefully, is the ideas that are presented as they're presented. Now, there will be times where we'll go to other places in the Bible. You know me well enough to know that. But my point is, see, people could take the idea of covenant and they can run over here and they can look at a particular passage and they can build their entire concept of covenant on a verse that occurs in Jeremiah or Isaiah. But you have to get that foundation right. That's my point. So I want to cover a few points from the reading as we build up to this. The narrative begins with yet another command from Elohim to Noah. By the way, how many things does Noah say in this reading? How much talking does he do? None. Again, we don't have Noah saying a word. I'm not saying he didn't speak. I'm saying, according to the narrative, Noah just simply, it says this, it's the root word, the word that God tells him. Elohim says, say, go. Now, this isn't the same word that's told to Avram later, lech lekah. Lech is walk. Walk, like walk for yourself. That's lech lekah. This is go, exit. Exit stage, right? You have one door in this vessel, go out. So it begins with a command to go in chapter 8, verse 15. Go out from the vessel, you and all y'all, go out. And then in verse 18, it says they went. So again, one of the keys in the story of Noah, and I think it's very instructional, I think it points to the reason he's considered in such high regard by the Elohim, is that when he's told to walk, he walks. When he's told to jump, well, that verb isn't used, but you get the idea. He's obedient to a T. Now, in chapter 8, verses 20 through 22, we see that Noah builds a slaughter site. Now, I want to make a couple of points here because some of you know my stand on the sacrificial cult. Because you could say, well, how could you possibly hold your crazy view, Ross? It's not supported by biblical evidence. But I think maybe you could wait a little while and maybe I'll have a few points to consider. Now, before I get into this, see, some of this I'm not going into because it's a little bit too controversial and our world has too much controversy right now. But I will go into some things. I'll say this, that the word that's translated, I think in most translations you'll see altar, but altar is just a parochial word. It represents something that, an altar, when I grew up as a kid in church, the altar was the thing you ran up to pray after the revival preacher finished his sermon. That was an altar. No slaughter, by the way, there. But so some people would say, well, that's not a real altar. In order to be a real altar, because the Hebrew word is mizbeach. Zavak is to slaughter. So you would think, well, an altar in its truest sense, that's where you kill stuff. In fact, in this story, we do have Noah building an altar. And he brings of the clean and sacrifices. Now, what kind of sacrifice does he bring? These are olah. And olah, there are different kinds of sacrifices. You all know this. But an olah is a holy burnt offering. In fact, the word olah is tied to the root meaning to go up, as in the smoke goes up. Nothing's saved. No, we don't have, and I'm just saying, we don't have certain portions of the meat going to this group or that group or the family eating it. It's just a holy burnt offering. All right. But nonetheless, we do have Hashem. It says he smells the smell. And what is the King James? It's a pleasing aroma. Right? Whatever it was, it did in many ways. It says after he smells this, let's look at it. Chapter 8, verse 21. Yeah, soothing smell. Yehovah smelled, verse 21, 8:21. Yehovah smelled the soothing smell. Yehovah said towards his heart. I love the literal. Now, when I say he spoke to his heart, you see that image? It's like you would think to yourself in a most pleasing way, right? It's speak to his own heart, to himself in its most literal sense. I will not add to treat lightly still the soil on account of the soil creature, for the shaping of the heart of the soil creature is bad from his youth. And I will not add still to strike every living thing as I've done. Whatever it was about the soothing smell, he immediately talks about the shaping of the heart of soil creature being bad. Now, it's interesting that in this particular place, there's no picture here that Adam has changed heart or will change heart, is there? You get the idea when you read this that what actually happens, the difference, I guess you could say, is that if there is a change at this moment in history, all the quote-unquote bad guys are gone. There's been a sacrifice. There's been a soothing smell. And Yehovah says, look, I'm not going to utterly destroy. I'm paraphrasing. I'm not going to utterly destroy man again or the earth again. Why not? Why not? Well, how could he commit to that? He's making a pact. And what he says is instructive. He says he realizes that man, the very shaping of his heart, is bad from his youth. That's the realization. That the proclivity of man, you see, there's a promise. What we enter in here now is a promise of restraint by Jehovah, because it's like it's no use in that sense. That every shaping of his heart. But you're thinking, wait a minute now. Here we've got all the bad guys are gone, and Noah's a just man. Tamim and his generations. He's got his wife or his women, his son and their women. But what he does is, given that realization, he says that it's going to be, he lists the cycles of time: seed and cutting, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night. Won't cease. You know, a lot of people talk about the end of the world like some cataclysmic and this is going to happen and that's going to happen. What we have in the unveiling of this promise is that things will continue. Things will continue. According to the Talmud, these are the divisions of time, the only divisions of time when you think about it. Seed and cutting, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night. Those are the divisions of time. And guess what? They go on in perpetuity. There's no end. And with Noah and his family, life begins again. Noah is in many ways a new Adam. You could call him a second Adam. It's a great picture for us to think about. He's righteous and just. He's whole in his life cycle, and he walked with God. As a new Adam, as we embark on a new heavens and a new earth, basically, he begins this journey, this new life, with a blessing. Did you notice that the same words of blessing that were given to Adam are given to Noah? So if you look at chapter 1 verse 28 or chapter 9 verse 7, I'm going to open up and just give it to you from the Hebrew. This is the blessing. He says, "Va'atim pru orvu," right? Be fruitful and multiply. Be fruitful and multiply. It's said actually in verse 1, pru orvu umelu et haaretz. Be fruitful, become many or become abundant, and fill the earth. It's repeated down in verse 7. Except this time it says, Va'atim pru urvu shirtzu, and swarm. The idea, though, is the same. When you go out, the first thing, it says he blessed him. And the very first thing that he blesses him with is abundance. Abundance. Chapter 9, verse 1 and verse 7 are the verses that have that blessing. But it's the same as chapter 1, verse 28. Be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth. See, because that's what's going on, is what you have now is you have a new beginning. And it begins with blessing. But the correlation doesn't stop there, because in Genesis chapter 1, verse 29, Adam is given a diet. You remember? The very next thing, he's blessed, be fruitful, multiply and fill the earth. And then he's given a diet. So in Genesis 1, verse 29, it says, and Elohim said, behold, I'm just reading this from the English. Behold, I've given you every herb yielding seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree, in which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed, to you it will be for food. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, and to everything that creeps upon the earth, wherein there is life, I've given every green herb for food. And it was so. See, the idea is that the blessing is given, a diet is given, and so it is with Noah. So it is with Noah. In Noah, what we have, the story of Noah in chapter 9, verses 2 through 3, listen to this diet. This is a little bit different diet. So Genesis 1:29 was Adam's diet. Now here is the diet given to Noah post-flood. The fear of you and the terror of you will be upon every living thing of the land. They're going to be scared. They're going to be terrified of you. And upon every flyer of the skies, with everything which the soil moves about, and with every fish of the sea, into your hand they are given. Every moving thing that is living, to you it will be for an eatable thing, as the green plant I gave you. Now all. Sounds like a Louisiana diet. Now I know that there are people who say, well, but that excluded unclean things, because we know that there was a distinction between clean and unclean, because there were clean things brought on the vessel and so forth. This is pretty direct, and it's that may be the case, but needless to say, whatever is allowed in terms of flesh, it's they're going to be scared. You're going to hunt them down and kill them and eat them. Diets change. Now you can still eat some green things, but you have this other part of the diet. The point is that there was a connectedness. You have blessing, you have diet. Now, in the garden, were they allowed to eat everything, from every tree? No, there was a restriction on their diet. All right. There's also restriction here. A restriction that I think is vital. I think it's important. If a person chooses to eat flesh, there is a restriction. And that restriction is in verse 4. Only flesh with its life breath, its blood, you will not eat. Don't eat blood. A lot of people, diet is a bad thing. One of the worst things a Bible teacher can get into is diet. Because somebody's going to say, well, I don't care what they say. I'm going to eat. Remember, we had a guy came here for a while, and I was teaching from the dietary laws in Leviticus 11 and Deuteronomy 14. And this guy stood up, he got mad, and he said, I don't care what you say. I'm going to eat my, what was it, a bacon biscuit? Bacon something. Pork chops, whatever it was. But so some people are real hard about diet. Plus they think, who are you to tell me what to eat? I'm just reading it. So here's the idea. Blood is forbidden. Now, I think that it's important because in certain religious cults, you know them because they partake of blood, whether real or perceived. Now, I want to read a couple of things just to cover a few high points about blood. If you'll go with me, and I'm going to read from the English translation. Let's just go to Leviticus chapter 7, verse 26. Leviticus 7:26. You shall eat no manner of blood, whether it be of a bird or a beast, in any of your dwellings. Whosoever it be that eats any blood, that soul shall be cut off from his people. You can argue about what that means. It just doesn't sound good, right? So whatever it means to be cut off from your people, if you don't know exactly what that means, it's safer just to not eat blood, right? So, we can debate the meaning, but let's just say don't eat blood. Now, go with me to chapter 17 of Leviticus, chapter 17, and let me pick up in, let's say verse 10. Whatsoever man there be of the house of Israel or of the strangers. See, this dietary rule, while some can argue other dietary rules, look, this is for even the strangers that sojourn among them, that eats any manner of blood. I will set my face against that soul that eats blood and will cut him off from among his people. For the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it to you upon the altar to make atonement or a covering for your souls. For it is the blood that makes atonement by reason of the life. Therefore, I said unto the children of Israel, no soul of you shall eat blood, neither shall any stranger that sojourns among you eat blood. Whatsoever man there be of the children of Israel or of the stranger that sojourn among them, that's 3 times. It says this, who take in hunting any beast or bird that may be eaten, he shall pour out the blood thereof and cover it with dust. Look, you can debate what it means for God to say he'll set his face against that soul, but whatever it means, it'd be easier just to not eat blood. I mean, right? So my point is, this is very serious. It's an infraction that is inclusive, meaning it's not just, see, some people would go, well, brother, you're telling me I can't eat pork, but I ain't a Jew. I can eat, whatever. You're like, okay, well, don't eat blood. Because some rabbis will even tell non-Jews, you're not under the dietary rule, whatever. Now, I believe that the Torah was given to Israel to teach to the nations, and ultimately the goal is that from sea to shining sea, on every continent, that ultimately people will follow the teaching as laid forth in the Torah. So I'm not saying that there's a difference there. In this passage I just read, it talks about whether you're from Israel or you're a sojourner, don't eat blood. Point taken? But I'm not finished. Go to Deuteronomy chapter 12. Deuteronomy chapter 12, and let me just read verse 16, I guess. Deuteronomy 12:16. Only ye, plural, shall not eat the blood. You shall pour it out upon the earth as water. Now go down to verse 23. Only be sure that you eat not the blood, for the blood is the life. You shall not eat the life with the flesh. You shall not eat it. You shall pour it out upon the earth as water. You shall not eat it, that it may go well with you and with your children after you, when you shall do that which is right in the eyes of Hashem. Again, it's really important. One more passage, if you will. Go to Deuteronomy chapter 15. Deuteronomy 15 and verse 23. Only shall not eat the blood thereof, you shall pour it out upon the ground as water. Now, some of you are thinking, wow, he hit every single... No, I didn't. There are others. Leviticus chapter 3, verse 17 is another passage. Read it on your own. Leviticus chapter 19, verse 26 is another one that says the same thing. Now, if you say, well, I'm a Christian, because I know that there are Christians who listen in, and you might feel that this restriction on blood doesn't apply to you. Well, you might want to read Acts chapter 15, because in Acts chapter 15, verses 20 and 29, I don't have that here, but I'm telling you, if you go look at it, what you're going to find is that there was a difficulty during the first century, during the Second Temple period, where non-Jews were beginning to find themselves drawn to these ancient Hebrew stories, and they wanted to know what applies to me versus what applies to the children of Israel. What rules do I need to keep? And one of the things that happens in Acts 15 at this council, they're debating various things, and it comes out that there are 4 things that the non-Jews need to be concerned with in order to have table fellowship, if you will, with the Israelites. No idols, avoid sexual immorality, things strangled, and from blood. Now, ultimately, you know what it says? For Moses of old hath them that preach him every Sabbath in the synagogue. In other words, this is what you tell them at first. They'll get the rest later. But you don't come in eating blood, things strangled, sexual immorality, and idols. So it's very important. I would encourage people that this stipulation on the diet is probably the single most important rule that we've had so far. I would highly, highly tell people, highly encourage people, if you eat, cook thorough. Okay. Brit, covenant, agreement, pact. And there is a lot that has been written on this subject, and quite honestly, people have overcomplicated it. Now, you can imagine a word that occurs 267 times in the Hebrew Bible. There's a lot to say about covenant, and there are a lot of people who've written extensively on this subject, and I haven't read every bit of it. But most of the scholarly sources in my library that contain information on this word berit, I have looked at very detailed. I've looked at very closely this week. What I'm going to do is, in the coming weeks and months and years, as we work through this triennial cycle, I'm going to explore and develop the developing that sounded kind of Hebrew. Develop the developing concept of covenant, of berit. So what I want to do is take things as it's revealed. So you'll have to, I'm working something out, not just for me, but for you, though you might not appreciate it yet. Hopefully you'll appreciate it in weeks and months to come. So be gracious. Don't go up in arms right away, throwing other verses in yet, if you can help it. I know some of you can't help it. Admittedly, there is much to learn on this subject, and there is a lot written by various scholars who have mastered or who profess, their profession is the ancient Near East. So a lot of studies in scholarly publications deal with the idea of covenant and what is required. See, this is the key. What is required for a covenant? So what they want to do is they want to say, here's what we know from ancient Near studies on berit. And so what they do is they take a template and they say, this is what we know from this covenant, this treaty, that's another word, between the king and his servants. And then they take that treaty and they put the template and they go, now every biblical covenant has to fit in there. I'm saying you can learn from these ancient Near East studies of berit, but don't try to make the template smash down on what the scripture says. I would like to, if you'll allow, I would like to take things as we get them, and if they line up with what some Assyrian covenant says, that's pretty cool. That might be something we can learn from. But I'm not going to take a document from the 7th or 8th century BCE and squeeze it back on the time of Noah. Not yet. Not at this point in the study. Everybody with me? See, I could get in real trouble here. It's Shabbat Shalom. We'll talk to you next week. No, actually, what I want to do is I want you to look with me to chapter 6, verse 18. Chapter 6, verse 18. And I'm going to read chapter 6, verse 18 through 21. And I have made rise my pact with you, and you will come toward the vessel. You, now if you're looking at the TB, that's bold-faced. That means because the pronoun you is emphasized. In the Hebrew, it's basically, there are two back-to-back usages of you, like you. So it's bold type. That means it's emphasized. So I've made my pact rise with you, and you will come toward the vessel. You and your sons and your woman and the women of your sons with you, and from every living thing of all flesh, two of all you will make come toward the vessel, to make them live with you, a male and a female they will be. And from the flyer according to its type, from the animal according to its type, from every moving thing of the soil according to its type, two from all will come toward you to make them live. And you will take for yourself of every eatable thing that's eaten, and will gather toward yourself, and it will be to you and to them for an eatable thing. And Noah did according to all that Elohim charged him. Thus he did. We're talking about making a covenant. And at this point, at least, stay with me, at this point, at least, no sacrifice, no blood, at least not yet. I already told you, Noah does in fact slaughter. It wasn't commanded, but it does seem to be accepted. Now, just as a side point, and this is a point that I just want to briefly touch on. Can an altar be an altar with no blood? Because if I could find even a hint of that in Scripture to go along with this idea that I'm working on, that I'm not covering in full yet, it would be interesting, I would think, because the word Mizbeach is a slaughter place. You think about the word, because the root word zevach is to slaughter. So I just recently happened to read through the book of Joshua very carefully in Hebrew. One of the things that I saw, I just wanted to put it out there in this study, and then we may pick it up later. I actually intend to do a separate class on this. But go with me, please, to Joshua chapter 22. Joshua chapter 22. And I just want to give you sort of the setting. The story is that the children of Reuben and the children of Gad and the half tribe of Manasseh have gone across and taken their possession. And just the briefest part of the story. And word gets back to the main camp where the tabernacle is, that these people across the river, on the other side of the river, as we would say here, on the other side, have made themselves an altar. Now, this is a problem. This is a problem because, at least in the book of Deuteronomy, we begin to see this idea that we have centrality of worship. We can't be doing this. But the word comes. So they send a delegation over to the 2.5 tribes, and they're going to wipe them out. You have rebelled, right? In other words, you've done this horrible thing. We just are getting settled in our new life, and you're going to bring bad on us. This is the story. So if you go down to verse 26, chapter 22, verse 26, this was the answer. Therefore, we said, let us now prepare to build us an altar, which, by the way, the Hebrew is mizbeach, not for burnt offering, nor for sacrifice. Okay? So this is a slaughter place, but not for slaughter. Right? Now that's kind of interesting. But it will be a witness between us and you and between our generations after us, that we may do the service of Hashem before him with our burnt offerings and with our sacrifices and with our peace offerings, that your children may not say to our children in time to come, you have no portion in Hashem. Therefore it will be, therefore said we, it will be when they so say to us or to our generation in time to come, we shall say, behold, the pattern of the altar. All right, let me look at that because I don't remember seeing that in the Hebrew, which our fathers made, not for burnt offering nor for sacrifice, but as a witness. The point being that this particular, it's called a mizbeach. It is there. It's not for the slaughter. It's not for the slaughter. That's not really my point, but I just wanted to add that in there to build on at a later point. The bottom line in chapter 6, verse 18, is that what we have is that we read that he has made rise his covenant, and that is before any slaughter. It is before any rules are given. This covenant is spoken of before any of that happens. Now, what I want to do is I want to quickly go through the occurrences of the word covenant in the story of Noah. I'm not talking about the story of Abraham or Josiah or Moses or anyone else, just Noah. In chapter 6 and verse 18, I'm just going to hit the high points. You can take a note. The person that's speaking in this covenant is Elohim. He says, with you, he says, I will establish my pact with you. Now there it's singular. Chapter 6, verse 18, Elohim is talking to Noah. He says, I will establish my covenant with you, singular. I will cause to rise my covenant. Notice the verb, cause to rise. In Hebrew, the word is kum. Kum, the root word is kum. It means to stand. It means to arise. It basically means, so in a lot of English translations, if you say, I'm going to cause this to stand up, I'm going to establish it. But I like the literal. He says, I'm going to cause to stand my covenant with you. Now, in chapter 9, verse 9, coming into this week's class, we have, I'm going to open back up my TEB translation. 1 second. Chapter 9, verse 9. In verse 8, and Elohim spoke toward Noah and toward his sons with him, saying, and I, look, it's me, am making rise my pact with you. Notice the P there, that's plural. And with your, plural, seed after you, plural. And with every living life breather that is with you, plural, among the flyer, among the animal, among every living thing of the land with you, plural, from all going out of the vessel to every living thing of the land. All right? See, what you have there is this idea that this covenant, it's God saying, I will make it with you. Now, plural, but it's not just with Noah and his wife and his sons and his wives with him, because if it were with the people, you could say that the pact has to be reciprocated. Now, I know I'm going into something a little bit. I want you to pay real close attention. If the pact, see, here's what people believe. There's stipulations in a pact where you have these two parties and they work together, right? One does one thing, one does another. Now, if it's just with the people, then you could say, well, the people will have responsibility through commands and so forth. But it's also with the animals. The pact is with the animals as well. Now, I'm harping on sacrifice for an important reason. What kind of sacrifice will the animals bring in order to be compliant to the pact? Sounds silly, but just think about it. All right, verse 11. And I have made rise my pact with you, and all flesh will not be cut off still by waters of the flood, and there will not again be a flood to ruin the land. Part of this pact, again, this is 3 in a row, I will cause to rise. Cum, cum, cum. And it's God saying this. Now, there are covenants later between people. That word agreement, treaty, covenant, people to people and so forth. In this particular story, what we see in our first exposure to the idea of Berit, it's from God saying, I will cause to rise 3 times in a row. And part of this is it's the agreement from him that he will not cut off all flesh by waters of the flood. And notice, the land will not be ruined. So this covenant is not only with the people and the animals, but with the land. Now, in verse 12, in chapter 9, verse 12, it begins to talk about the sign of the pact that I am giving you, that I am giving you. So the verb now changes for the first time. I will cause to rise my pact. I will cause to rise my pact. And now it's the root word natan, to give, to put, to place. So we're beginning to talk about this sign of the pact that is given to who? Between me, between you, plural, between every living life breather that is with you for life cycles, age, lasting. Covenant with every living life breather. In chapter 9, verse 13, he says, my bow. Again, we have I. The word covenant is associated for the second time with the word give, because we're talking about this sign. Give, put, place, natan. And my bow I have given in the cloud, and it will be for a sign, a pact between me and the land. So I want you to think about this. When we think about a pact, an agreement, a covenant, a treaty, people tend to think this is the pact between God and Noah, and there's going to be your sacrifice. Yep, I'll count that. That fits here into the template. And then we're going to have these rules that are associated with the covenant. But this Berit is with Noah, his woman, his sons, their women, all the animals, and the land. Verse 19, chapter 9, verse 15, he says, and I will remember. The idea of remembering a covenant. Zachar is the root word there. I will remember between me and between you and between every living life breather among all flesh. Waters will not become still, a flood to ruin all flesh. And then, secondly, it's I will cause to rise. He says, the sign of the pact that I have made rise between me and between all flesh that's on the land. Noah is or represents a new beginning, a new Adam. There is a blessing attached to Noah beginning life anew on earth. In a way, it's framed between chapter 9, verse 1 and chapter 9, verse 7. There's a diet that's given with the restriction, don't consume blood. I encourage people, this is a key point in this universal covenant. Don't consume blood. Even if you're Christian, remember there are passages in the book of Acts. One who pours out the blood of man, by man will his blood be poured out. There is an association of blood with this covenant. You know what it is? Don't eat it. Don't eat it. That's the blood of this covenant. Don't eat it, nor should you pour out the blood of man, right? That's what blood has to do with this covenant. Now, unlike in the story of Adam, with Noah, we meet with the word covenant. Every aspect of this, in other words, with Adam, we don't see the word covenant. With Noah, we see the word covenant. It's a major part of the story. It occurs 8 times within this very short saga. And every aspect of this covenant, the ownership, the onus is on Elohim. It's what he is doing. My, without exception, he causes it to stand. He remembers it. The covenant doesn't mention blood other than don't consume it. There's no mention in the tree of a guarantee of a change of heart for Adam. Remember, this pact is God's promise to all life and all the earth. Life and limb, basically. I mean, it covers everyone and everything. It's truly universal. Now, ancient sermons based upon the triennial cycle readings indicate that Isaiah 42 was the text that was associated with this triennial portion. So we have these ancient lists that show this particular prophet section was tied in this ancient sermon. So I want you, no, Isaiah 42. I'm going to go with me to Isaiah 42, in fact, and I'm going to read part of that chapter because these verses, because of certain connecting words, we have these ancient sermons that remain, and these are some of the word connections they made. So if you're a word student, you'll find some of these connections interesting. Isaiah 42, beginning in verse 5. Thus saith Ha'el, the God, if you will, Jehovah, he that created the heavens and stretched them forth, he that spread abroad the earth, and that which comes out of it. Now, the word there is tied to the root say, to go out. And so one of the ancient sermons is all those who go out. That goes back to the story of Noah. It's the very first word of importance, and it has to do with the naming of this Torah portion because God, Elohim, tells Noah, say, go out. So this is the root word here. He that gives breath unto the people upon it, and spirit to them that walk therein. I, Jehovah, have called you in righteousness. What do you think the connecting word there is with Noah? And will hold your hand and will keep you and give you for a covenant of the people, for a light of the Gentiles, to open blind eyes, to bring out prisoners from the dungeon, and them that sit in darkness out of the prison house. I am Jehovah, that is my name, and my glory will I not give to another, neither my praise unto graven images. Behold, the former things are come to pass, new things do I declare, before they spring forth, I tell you of them. This particular portion from Isaiah, one of the so-called servant songs, and it deals with the role of Israel. But interestingly enough, these ancient teachers made connections between the story of Noah and this particular passage, because the verbal agreement with those that go forth with this idea of the spirit, which we also encounter the word ruach in the Noah story, called in righteousness. Noah is called in righteousness. The word covenant is here in this particular text. Now, where it mentions dungeon, those who are closed up, there is commentary that talks about the fact that when Noah goes into the ark, what happens? He gets closed up in there. So he was called in some of these ancient commentaries the one who was closed up. So when he's told, come out, exit, it's the connection there. Now, interestingly enough, Noah is one who begins again. So this particular passage ends with former things, right, are come to pass, and new things do I declare. So you could see that the message to Noah to begin again is captured here. This covenant with Noah is the only universal covenant in the Hebrew Bible. Now, let me make a point. Isaiah 56 makes it clear that for a eunuch or a non-Jew who wants to be part of any covenant, they can join the covenant. They can join the Berit by taking on those obligations that are stipulations within the Berit that they join. This one is universal in the most universal way. It not only applies to Noah, it applies to his family. It not only applies to the humans, it applies to the animals. It not only applies to the humans and the animals, but to the earth. The sign is a universal sign saying that no longer, not again still, will I cause these waters to ruin. It came to be associated in later literature, this covenant, as the covenant of the sons of Noah. Next week, we read about the sons of Noah, and I will be sharing on this subject. Now, here's something that I want to tell you ahead of time, because I've actually started looking at how to map out next week's class. Next week's class, I think right now, at least right now, my studies lead me to say that it'd be different in this sense. There is what is called B'nai Noah. Some of you have heard this. B'nai Noah is the designation for non-Jews who seek to live their life according to the Torah, by the 7 laws. Some of you have heard about the 7 commandments of Noah. Generally, I stick strictly with the text, and this is what the Bible says, and here I'm not worried about this or I'm not worried about that. But I want to get into this idea of what is it that the Jewish people would describe as faith according to non-Jews. And I want to do that because I think it's very important, because more and more people are beginning to wake up and leave their former religion, and they're somewhere stuck in the middle. They're like, well, I'm neither this and I'm not Jew. I haven't converted. Well, this is what Judaism says. B'nai Noah, they say this is what non-Jews who seek to live their life according to a Torah life, this is what you should be called. This is what you are. So if everybody's okay with that, I want to get into the subject of B'nai Noah. What is it? Where do they get the idea? And I want to talk about that. In fact, I'll give you one little thing going into it. Some people who are in B'nai Noah will say, well, the phrase B'nai Noah doesn't occur in the Bible. It's a Talmudic designation. Well, it is a Talmudic designation, but guess what? It's in the Bible. It's in next week's Torah portion that I'm going to be teaching from, it talks about that exact phrase is used. So I want to talk to you next week on. This week was more, what does this particular portion say about this covenant? Don't use the template, not yet. You can, if you want to do that later, okay, but don't use it yet. Let's stick with what we can know and discern from the text, from the words, in connection with the words, and on the basis of the words. If something fits later, we'll pull that in. As a final class on Noah, I want to give you this information. I think it'll be quite useful, at least in your awareness, or your knowledge, or information concerning the 7 laws of Noah. So be sure to join us. I do want to stop, but I want to say one other thing about covenant. When I say that this covenant with Noah is the only universal covenant, most of you who've listened to me for a while, you're great Bible students. You probably knew this and didn't learn it from me, but most people within Christianity have been led to believe that the quote-unquote Old Testament has covenants that are particular to the Jews, and that Christianity, through the Christian writings, brings about a covenant that's universal, and it's not just with Israel, it's with all the people, and they call that the New Covenant. And they even, in the Christian writings, quote this one passage from Jeremiah 31 that actually uses a phrase, New Covenant. But again, what I'm trying to tell people is pay close attention to the wording. So you probably know this already, but I want to close with this idea of a different covenant, a new covenant, and it begins in Jeremiah 31, verse 31. Hine yamim ba'im ne'um Adonai. Behold, days come, saith Yehovah, that I will make a new covenant. There's our word. A new covenant with everybody on the planet. No, that's not what mine says. It says with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. Very, very particular. The new covenant is with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, whoever those two groups represent, and they are two groups. Notice verse 32, not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers. So this is talking about a specific group, physically descended from the people that he brought forth out of Egypt. Not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day that I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, which my covenant they broke. Although I was a husband to them, saith Yehovah. But this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, saith Yehovah. I will put my Torah in their inward parts, and in their heart will I write it, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. Now, here's how you know it's coming to pass. Like you could say, some might say, well, the new covenant's already here. You're talking about a covenant with Noah. What is that? I mean, we're in the new covenant, baby. I mean, that's old. This is, look at this. This is what it says. They shall no more teach every man his neighbor and every man his brother, saying, know Yehovah, for they shall all know me, from the least of them unto the greatest of them, saith Yehovah. Let me ask you a question. Is it your opinion, is it in an honest assessment, is that where we're at right now? I don't think we're there yet. All right, it says, I will forgive their iniquity and their sin I will remember no more. We tend to conflate all the different covenants, and the covenants should be viewed. You can learn things generally about the topic, about the word. You can apply certain things that we can garner and gain from Near East studies about this idea. But please, let's take these and look at them and don't try to make every covenant fit exactly. There is some truth in the template. There is some truth in the template. But just be careful there, is all I'm saying. All right, so be sure to join us next week. I'm going to talk about this idea of the 7 laws of Noah. So we're going to take a short break, and we're going to come back and do a dialogue. Shabbat shalom. Let me know. We ready? All right. Okay. Shalom, shalom. And I tell you what, somebody has stretched you guys up this morning. There is no way I can go back and read all those notes, but I will say this, just as a reminder, the UIW conference is here. I mentioned it at the beginning, but if you missed it, if you joined in late, please, if you can come, please come to the conference. Just a couple of words about that. The website now is active. We do have up on the website the registration, so please do that. We haven't put out our program as of yet because the good doctor is presently in the land of Israel. He's filming for a PBS special, I believe. And so he's over there now. He'll be back this weekend at some point. And the Tylers, Ralph, James, myself, and this lovely group of local folks here are going to coordinate and put together a conference. Jodell is also going to help us with that, and I'm sure many others. But the program will always be, I think, worth the trip. And you know, we generally have some good classes, some classes that I think are challenging, but at the same time, it's our one time a year to get everybody together. If you can't come any other time, and I mean, I love it. What do you guys say?
Oh,
That's why they call
fellowship,
it an annual conference.
That's
the
an annual.
discussions,
Right.
yeah,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
the late night discussions and fellowship is just wonderful.
And we hope that because we're doing this in St. Francisville, that people from Texas and Mississippi and Alabama and Tennessee, people that are closer to the Southeast. I mean, we want people to fly in from Canada and Israel and wherever you are, obviously.
In
California, that's right.
We're almost banking on the Texas folks to come here.
Well, we have to because, you know, I really pitched to get it here.
That's what I'm saying.
You know, quite honestly, I don't even have a job right now. So I was working. Hey, I don't.
Is she scooting over? I'm scooting over. I'm like,
what are y'all doing?
I
I can't tell if you're trying to get closer or farther.
No, I want to be able to lean back, stay up.
But I'm looking forward to this greatly. And here's the thing. Some people have asked a question. This building is lovely, but it holds about, I'm guessing, maybe 50. And generally, the conferences push maybe double that. So the reason I need people to register is because I need to know pretty soon, and I'm going to go ahead and reserve the Temple Sinai Synagogue because we'll need to not here.
Yeah, not that one.
I thought I was over here. See how I did that? But I want to go ahead and reserve that so that we can be ready to take in a big crowd. Now the thing about it is, James is on. Hey James, let's see what time.
He just came in.
Oh, it's only 8 o'clock in Jerusalem.
So when the Sabbath was over, he came on.
Okay, good. So James, I hope you are. You have a new and exciting subject. I have one as well too. Wow. And we haven't even talked about what we're going to talk about yet. But so here's the thing: we would use this building for part of the classes. I don't know if we would have like all the girls come here and all the men go there or something like that. No, we wouldn't do that.
All right, Paul.
We wouldn't do that.
I'm going where the food's at.
That's right. But anyway, so please join us. And I think one of the things that I want to talk about this morning is, well, obviously what you want to talk about, but I did mention some things. It's not the first time that I've sort of come out and made a statement that is not necessarily this pro-sacrificial thing. And so one of the points that I wanted to make today, rather than fully get into that whole thing, because I might teach on that during the conference, who knows. But what I did want to say is that these covenants are different in many ways. James said we'll put a curtain in the middle between the men and the women.
I
to
caught
keep the
that.
women from Googling over us. I mean, it's so hard with Dave.
No,
and I,
you
right?
know how you men
So we
are.
won't
Y'all have
starve.
to.
That's what it
You
is.
have to keep blinders on y'all.
Yeah,
You're nuts.
I
We'll be
know.
over there eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches.
That's right. So, but here's the thing. When we first meet with the idea of Berit in Genesis, it begins with Noah. It is a pact. I like that word because we tend to associate certain parochial language, and then we define all sorts of theology based on our understanding of that term. And it's not necessarily a one size fits all. There are certain themes that do come out in covenants. But I'll give you something else kind of to take the edge off. I once saw in I'm trying to think of the commentary I was looking at. Oh, it's Everett Fox's translation of the Torah. And what Everett Fox does, which by the way, that's a good translation of the Torah. Everett Fox begins to look at these ancient stories and find patterns, right?
Yeah.
So would you say that a consistent pattern in the patriarchal narratives is sibling rivalry?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. You have
I-
Cain and Abel.
Very much.
You have Jacob and Esau. You have Ishmael and Isaac. That's a consistent theme that almost seems like a scribal template. So what Everett Fox does is he puts together a series of recurring themes that seem to be template oriented. All right, here's another
Which
one.
applies a single author.
Yeah,
whether,
it could very well.
Various different men.
You would almost look at it and go, okay, I need a sibling rivalry story. Okay.
In fact, that's how a lot of scholars do their research on the themes there.
They do.
Yeah.
That's exactly right, Dave. They look at those things. And so that whether the argument goes, well, did the author have those themes in mind and build the story, or did the story actually happen and consist of those themes? So
yeah, because that leads to the sacrificial thing. It's like
it does.
How did he know? How did Noah know to do this?
Well,
I mean, there's no Torah. There's no,
Yeah. And was he
know?
told to do it?
Was he told to do it, or it? Because when I'm reading this transparent version, and I'm seeing words like Jehovah smell the soothing smell, and then he said towards his heart, like you said, it touched his heart.
Yeah.
It sounds like
He really wants that.
But it sounds like pagan sacrifices to gods to appease them.
Yeah.
And that's what hangs me up. It's like, did this really happen? Did Jehovah really want this? Or is this something that was happening in the world from the beginning, that these pagan ideas, and somehow it turned into...
Here's something to think about along those lines. And I don't have the answer for that, but
well, you understand what I'm saying?
But here's what you can think about. How did the story of what happened before Noah get passed through? How did that happen?
Yeah.
In other words, my point is, it came through Noah. The stuff that happened before Noah.
Yeah.
The story
had
to come through Noah. So
yeah.
I don't know if that helps any or hurts, but it doesn't really answer your question. It just brings out a point that it's all related somehow there.
I mean, in the past, y'all,
there's a connection.
Because of my upbringing, where you didn't question the words, I would have never even entertained the thought of, wait, did this really happen? Did God really want this? Because it says here that he did it, and God was pleased with it.
So there are various answers on some of these topics, whether a person accepts them or not. One of the things that is interesting, and to keep it, because you could get into all sorts of deep digging on this particular subject, and people don't always agree, which is what's so good about this. Collectively, we come to the table, we look at these ancient stories, and we seek to understand, derive from them what is actually required.
That's it.
All right.
What
So
do you want? Jehovah,
so
what?
here's one of the things that actually drives my thought. There are things now this is the world according to Ross. So for what it's worth, what it's worth. Ultimately, I think we all agree that what we really want is to be pleasing to God.
Absolutely.
All right. And
we
I think
know the truth.
we want to know the truth. We want to know the truth. Now, all of us began our search at a certain place. Doesn't mean we were all in the same place, but over time, let's put it this way. When I was a child, I thought as a child. Where did I hear that? All right. So here's the thing, though. So I want to know what God really wants. Now, there are things which God allows that may not be exactly what he wants. Now, the big one for me, one of the big ones, there are a few big ones, but one of the big ones, it's the very first thing I ever taught. James Tabor gave me an opportunity before I was gray-headed to teach a class. In fact, he told me, you get 2 time spots at this B'nai Noah conference in Athens, Tennessee. And I'm just a Bible study guy. I'm not, they had people like Dr. James Tabor on the ticket. They had people like
scholars,
certain rabbis, and then they have a kid.
This goofy guy come up here and talk.
They have a guy from.
You don't have no letters.
I didn't have anything except I had a friend in high places who said, "Come talk." So this is what my 2 classes were: A King Like the Nations, in which I systematically said that God never wanted a king. It wasn't just my idea. It's an idea that, according to the text, God says they have rejected me in asking for a king for themselves. Now, here's what people go. They say, well, wait a minute now. But Deuteronomy chapter 17 says you can have a king. Yeah,
but here's what the king's going to do.
But understand that there is a teaching, a Torah, a piece of instruction that deals with king. And I think that it's interesting that God never asked for that, right? All right. So my second class was called To Break a Dog's Neck.
Wow.
To break a dog's neck. Now that sounds horrible, but it's from Isaiah chapter 66. And Isaiah 66 talks about, if you just read it, in fact, just now people go, oh yeah, but you need to read this, this, and this, but just stick with me. In Isaiah 66 verse 1, it says, thus saith Jehovah, heaven is my throne, the earth is my footstool. What manner of house will you build unto me? And what place shall be my rest? For all these things have my hand made, and so all these things came to be, saith Jehovah. But to this man I will look, even to him that is poor and of a contrite spirit, and that trembles at my word. He that kills an ox is like him that slays a man. He that sacrifices a lamb as he that breaks a dog's neck. He that offers an oblation as he that offers swine blood. He that burns frankincense as he that blesses an idol. Yes, they have chosen their own ways, and their own soul delights in their abominations, and on and on and on. Now, people will say, yeah, but there are other passages. You're not taking in the whole counsel. What I'm suggesting is that we do have to take in the whole counsel. I think that if one listens to certain stories and reads them at face value, someone could say, God commanded sacrifice. Now, let me ask you this. Abraham is told, take now your son, your beloved son, and kill him. Yeah. Now, this might anger people, this might upset people, this might make people never listen to me again, but I have to be honest. I would not do that.
Right there with you.
I would not do that. Now, I understand that people are going, hey, hold on just a second.
Probably wouldn't listen to that voice again either.
I can't imagine. Now, I know people, I'm not trying to offend. I want people to get this. Now, think about this. If Abraham had gone through with it, he could have said, I fulfilled the law. He could have said, I did what was commanded of me. But God stopped him. God stopped that. You go, yeah, and he provided a lamb. Okay, but stick with me here. That command to slaughter was given and stopped. Now, Jeremiah is a classic example. And I'm going to, I probably will really expound on this. I might do this for the conference, but here's the thing. The thing that I think about is there are certain things that show up in the text that we suppress. We don't suppress the sacrificial thing. We say, bring that back. But those many passages which suggest otherwise, we suppress those. Now, let me give you an example. There are quite a few, but just to kind of hit some high points. And I actually think I know the reason behind this, but I'm not going to go into that yet. I'm withholding myself. But go with me to Jeremiah 7. Let's just start there, and let's just hit a few things. Jeremiah chapter 7. Now, there's something interesting about Jeremiah. Jeremiah is a priest. Okay, he is part of a group which is from Anatot. Now, if you do a little research, hint, do a little research on Anatot, who's there? Why were they in Anatot? And who, particularly among the priestly cadre, is in Anatot? All right, just do that. Now, here's what the priest from Anatot says. I love Jeremiah. Jeremiah 7:21. Thus saith Jehovah of hosts, the God of Israel, add your burnt offerings unto your sacrifices, and eat ye flesh. All right. For I spake not unto your fathers, nor commanded them in the day that I brought them out of the land of Egypt concerning burnt offerings or sacrifices.
Wow.
What?
Wow.
Now, hold on a minute. Hold on a minute. I know people are going, yes, he did. Yes, he did. Stick with me. But this thing I commanded them, hearken unto my voice. Now, look, if God, the story of Abraham, it's called the Akedah, Genesis 22. If you go to Akedah, you see the story. He says, go kill your son. Then he goes, stop. All right. I know you'll go through with anything. Don't do it. All right. But this thing I command him, hearken to my voice. He listened to his voice. And I will be your God, and you shall be my people, and walk ye all in all the way that I command you, that it may be well with you. But they hearkened not, nor inclined their ear, but walked in their own counsels, and in the stubbornness of their evil heart, and went backward and not forward. Since the day that your fathers came out of the land of Egypt unto this day, I've sent unto you all my messengers, the prophets, rising up early and sending them, yet they hearkened not unto me, nor inclined their ear, but made their neck stiff. They did worse than their fathers. What is it that the prophets are saying? Well, this is kind of troubling because he says, I never said to you about these sacrifices in the wilderness. Did the people of Israel offer sacrifices in the wilderness? I'm going to provide you with some thought-provoking things.
They told Moses, we need to go to the desert to sacrifice to our God.
But
isn't that in the text?
Is it sacrifice or worship?
Yeah, worship.
I don't know,
But
King James.
what about Leviticus? Where was
I don't know.
Leviticus from?
Hang on.
I mean, where did they get Leviticus? So
Okay.
That was later?
All right. Hang on. All right. So these are just things to provoke your thinking.
Yeah.
All right. Because if I give it all away in one sitting, then everybody's going to go. No, there are things that I don't know, honestly.
Okay.
But there are questions that I'm working on right now.
Mhm.
But this text and the one from us, now there are many, many more, but let me give you another one. You asked the question about in that time in the wilderness. If you go to Amos chapter 5, let's see. Now, again, people explain these away, but I just want you to capture. I'm not going to go into everything in context, and I want people to go study it on their own. But just as a question, Amos chapter 5, verse 21, I hate. Everybody there, Amos 5:21? I despise your feast, and I will take no delight in your solemn assemblies. Yea, though ye offer me your burnt offerings and meal offerings, I will not accept them, neither will I regard the peace offerings of your fat beast. Take you away from me the noise of your songs. I will not hear the melody of your viols, but let justice roll down as waters and righteousness as a mighty stream. Here's a question for you.
Martin Luther King.
Yeah, they got it from Martin. Look, Amos 5:25, one more verse. Did you bring unto me sacrifices and offering in the wilderness 40 years, O house of Israel? Okay. Now, people can say, well, that's just talking to the corrupt group, and they're, what about this? What about that? Just stick with me. I'm not going to fully go into this right now, but there is a school of thought that says, if we don't, and I'm speaking for Ross, I'm not speaking on behalf of an organization, I'm not speaking on behalf of anyone but my present research, what I am presently digging into very, very deeply. I promise you that I am giving it my full attention, and my conclusions are not totally firm. Is that fair enough as a disclaimer? Here's the thing. There are things that are allowed and that have been allowed, but there are many, many people who believe that without the shedding of blood, there's no forgiveness of sins. That in order to appease the gods, God.
Yeah.
I use your phrase like
because that's what.
But there is a group of people that says, if you don't do these things, your walk of faith is not right with God. Now, here's why I stress what I stressed this morning. Right? Did Noah kill any animals as sacrifices to achieve that being called he was righteous in his, according to the text, before the flood?
I have a question. You know, on that very point, it comes from one of our participants, and I want to know the answer to that question. Ross, you keep pointing out how Noah did what God told him to do, but here God does not tell him to offer burnt sacrifices. Is that true? Is that statement true?
According to the text, it doesn't say that God said, now go, you know. All right. So is that right? Am I right? All right. So now, does that mean it's wrong? I admit it. It seems it's a pleasing, soothing smell and so forth. So you go, well, it spoke to his heart. My point is this. If we have to have sacrifices, if we have to have a temple and we have to have a sacrifice, then all of us are blind, miserable, and naked. Woe is us right now.
Better go get some chicken.
And get some what? Chicken. And think about this, guys. It's been like that for 2,000 years. Now, what Christianity has done is they say, well, we had a sacrifice.
Right.
But the ones who don't, you know, and so then what people go is, yeah, but look at Ezekiel chapters 40 through 48. There's going to be this. There's going to be, oh, Ross, you forgot about this. Like I hadn't read Ezekiel. Okay. Here's the deal. What I'm concerned with is what is it going to look like in the end? Okay. Here's an example. I believe, because a prophet says that ultimately we will be speaking Hebrew. Zephaniah, it talks about, and I will convert the people to a pure lip, that they will all be able to call upon me. That's coming up. I'm going to get into that in the next few weeks, because at Babel, all the languages were confused. But ultimately, that curse too will be reversed, and people will speak Hebrew. So guess what Ross is doing? Hey, I'm starting to try to learn Hebrew now. Now, I might miraculously be given a gift, and I look forward to that and welcome it with open arms. But until then, I'm working towards the glorious view that the prophets gave me. I want to see a time when the swords are beaten into plowshares and the spears into pruning hooks. Do I recognize that for a period of time we have bad ones in the earth and we need to take them off the map? Yeah. I'm an army guy. Yeah. But I long for a day when every man sits under a fig tree with his neighbor. Now, people could go, yeah, but what about this? You don't know this guy. I wouldn't want to sit under a tree with him. Okay. Now, here's the thing. Whenever I look at the prophetic vision, here's what these prophets had. You know what a prophet had that the average populace didn't have? They had a word from God. A living, spoken word from the Creator. He said, I'm going to put my words in your mouth, and you will speak those words to the people. Now, if they don't hear you, now there were also competing groups out there. There were other kind of teachers who wrote things and who organized laws and, whatever. I'm talking about the prophets here. I'm talking about some things that they said that make me go, whoa. Give you an example. I could give you a bunch, but I'll do it just a little bit at a time.
One quick one while you're doing that is that Abraham told his servants that his son and him will be back. That was a point Wade brought out here. In other words, in the sacrifice.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
In other words, he told his guys, we'll be right back. We will be right back.
Yeah.
So
I'll touch on that. Good point. So to Wade's point, people look at that story and they go, okay, Abraham was fully confident that he wouldn't have to go through with it, because he said, I and the lad will go up and we'll offer it and we'll come back.
Good example.
And then there's another view that takes it even further and says, technically, it doesn't mention Isaac coming with him. And the next time we see Isaac is at the well of souls. So he was killed actually. And then they take it further and they say, Sarah hears the news and she dies. Okay. Yeah. So there are a lot of thoughts there. But what we have is we have a direct command, kill your son. Yeah. And then we have a command that follows that says, stop. Just stop. Okay. So I want you to go with me to the book of Micah. Now, I've read this before, but maybe people's ears are perked now. I want you to go to Micah chapter 6 and begin with verse 6. With verse.
You get it right.
Wherewith shall I come before Jehovah and bow myself before the high God? Wow. I mean, this is a good question. I mean, what is God really?
What are you going to bring with you?
What you going to bring with you? Yeah. Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? Will Jehovah be pleased with thousands of rams, or with 10,000 rivers of oil? Hey, shall I give my first? Hey, wasn't in there. I just put that for effect. Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? He's shown you, O man, what is good, ma tov. And what does Jehovah seek from you? I mean, what does he seek from you? What is it? An ox?
That he wants?
What do you need? A calf? Do you need a burnt offering? Do you need? What is it that he wants? This is a prophet. Right. He's shown you, O man, what is good, and what does Jehovah seek from you? Dorosh is the word there, doresh. But to do justice, to love loving kindness, and to walk humbly or circumspectly with your God. And here's the thing. With the destruction of the temple in 70 by Titus, people were sent scrambling. Mm-hmm. And why were they sent scrambling? because now that external act,
Yeah.
which they believe drew near themselves to the Creator, was no longer available. And so what do you do?
Yeah.
I mean, I have this weight. I need to, and so what people begin to think about, and some of the great religious minds throughout Judaism in the early first centuries began to look at what is there a substitute then for the slaughter? Is there something in the text? Now, the reason that this is important to me now, because if people are right, and I know I'm drawing fire here, I'm not even looking at the screen yet, but I want people to think, if that view is right, that we must have this system, this cult in place in order to draw near to God, what are we doing now?
Right.
We're in the same place as these other people. So it makes me think, does the Bible present a picture of the world where they will not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain? Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Does the Bible picture a scene that says, look, God doesn't need that. He needs your heart. Now, some would argue, well, if your heart's right, you'll do this, you'll do that. Well, right now, it isn't happening. And you know, people can look to a day where those kind of things are happening. And I'm saying, if it does happen, beyond that, beyond even that, there's something better that's coming where no sacrifices are again. So let's say they rebuild a temple, they begin to offer sacrifices. That's not the end goal, because that too will be replaced by a house of prayer for all people. Now, Tabor brings up, someone once said, go learn what this meant. I desire chesed and not sacrifice. Let's look at that verse. Hosea, someone quoted Hosea 6 verse 6, and here's what it says. What did I do? Hit the wrong book? Yeah, no, I didn't. Because chesed I desire. Chesed is loving kindness. What we just read in Micah. Here's another prophet. These guys were consistent. Chesed I desire, velo zavak. You know what that means? And not sacrifice. V'da'at Elohim me'olot. And the knowledge of God more than olat. This Allah is to go up these holy consumed offerings. The idea here is that if you compared what God desires versus this other system, you look at this idea and it's no comparison. It's what the prophets envisioned for the world to come. I mean,
from the beginning, God, before Adam, the story of Adam, before the Father, God walked with man in the cool evening.
Yeah,
that was what God wanted.
Yeah,
and then man messed up and hid himself from God. Tried to anyway. Yep. Tried to sacrifice a fig leaf, as it says, to cover himself. So I mean, what I'm saying is the sacrifice thing is a way we think in our mind that we can get closer to God or block our sins from God or something so that we can be closer to him.
Appease him.
The truth is he wants to walk with us, and we just need to do that, basically, once we start walking with him. It's not a thing that we can do. I can't sacrifice enough. I can't.
Yeah, one point brought that question, prayer, a substitute for sacrifice. That's pretty broad, though.
I believe, no, but that's a good point. It's a good point, though, because there's a passage in Scripture that actually talks about prayer in exchange for sacrifice. I'll have to think about that one, but I don't know off the top of my head where it's at, but I do recognize that it is a Scripture, and it's in the Hebrew Bible, by the way. Let me touch on Passover and just say this.
What's going on with that? There's a lot of talk about it.
The question.
A sacrifice.
But let's, if you think about the Passover, Pesach, is the sacrifice.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
So what people will say is you have to consume it on Pesach.
Yeah.
Right? And so let me ask you a question. And let me, without going through all the progression there, how do you kill the Passover? Who kills it? Where does it have to be killed? All right, just as a question. If we're going to follow it, where, when, and how? And how do you cook it? Do you roast it on fire or do you boil it? Because I've got verses that say both.
But is Passover just a lamb? Is that it's all about?
It's about that slaughter.
Okay.
Now, so here's the question. In this, when I think about what's coming, because see, I'm focused on a prophetic view. Okay, James pulled it up. 141, Psalm 141:2. Let my prayer be counted as incense before thee, and the lifting up of my hands as an evening sacrifice.
Cool.
All right.
Thank you, James.
See there, it's good to have. James knows a little bit of Bible now. I ain't gonna lie. Now, so here's a thought for you.
He told me once the Bible had a lot of stuff in it.
It does. If you focus on the ideal, what's coming, if you focus on the ideal and what's coming, what happens to Passover? All right. Is Passover an eternal statute? And people go, yes. Okay.
I just think some people miss the point of it.
Well, hang on. Go to Jeremiah 16. Jeremiah 16. Passover is forever, right?
No, there's gonna be a time when we forget about it.
Jeremiah 16:14. Therefore, Jeremiah 16:14. Therefore, behold. Let me look at the Hebrew real quick, make sure. Therefore, hine yamim ba'im ne'um Adonai. Therefore, behold, days are coming, saith Yehovah, that it will no more be said. Now, I want you to let that sink in. There is coming a time, according to my main man, Jeremiah, that you won't even say this anymore.
Right.
What? As Yehovah lives, that brought up the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt. Now, hang on. Now, let me let that absorb for a second. You're telling me that the single thing, it says in the Torah that the thing, God made a name for himself, it says.
I am the God that brought you out.
I am the God that brought you out of the land of Egypt. You shall therefore have no other gods before me. I'll make another point here in a minute. Let me write this down. I'm getting ahead. Boy, this is rolling now. So this is a real class today. All right. So if Jeremiah says that it's not even going to be mentioned anymore, what? Now wait. But as Yehovah lives, that brought up the children of Israel from the land of the north and from all the countries whither he had driven them, and I will bring them again into their land that I gave unto their fathers. Now, let me ask you this. Look at that. James wants to be in this so bad. Look, I know. This is my teacher, right? Now, think about this. The Passover. How much of the present Torah deals with stories about God bringing, or the Tanakh? How much of the Tanakh deals with the God that brought the children of Israel out of Egypt? Now, look, you're not going to say that anymore. It's not even...
Pretty much reminds them every time. I'm the guy that did this.
Yeah. Now, but it's not going to be. Now, here's the deal. So we have a new covenant. A new covenant is coming. Behold, days are coming, saith the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah, not like the covenant that I made with their fathers, when I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt. My covenant they broke, though I was a husband to them. But this is the covenant that I will make with them in those days. What we're talking about is something different, something drastic. Now, he says he's going to write the Torah on their hearts. What's he going to write on their hearts? Is it going to be about Passover? Is it going to be about Passover? He just said, now, why would you write something in this new covenant on their heart that they're not even going to remember anymore?
Well, to me, it's like he's going to write his instructions on our heart. He's not going to write all these Bible stories down on your heart.
Okay. Now, let's go with that for a second.
Okay.
So the 10 words. Let's say he's going to write the 10 words on the heart. Okay. Look at James. Don't blame me for your ideas.
Yeah.
All right. So here's the thing. When you talk about the 10 words, all right, if I have ever read those, and I think I have, there's mention in there about I am Jehovah who brought you forth out of the land of Egypt. So will that part be written on there, the part that we're not going to think about anymore?
Yeah.
Or is it something else?
I have an idea. It could be both. It could be both. Because it doesn't really say you won't remember it anymore. It's not. It doesn't say you won't not remember. There'll be a time when you don't remember that of Exodus, the story of Exodus.
There are some
talking about it.
Maybe
It'd be something overshadowing, I think.
Maybe. But let me take it a little bit further. Let me seal up that loophole for you.
Okay.
That I'll say, okay. Now, this in the Torah, and this still goes along with your point because there's certain stories. In the Torah, in the construction of the tabernacle.
Right.
What's the tabernacle for? Now, by the way, the tabernacle stories go from Exodus 25 all the way through, the book of Numbers.
Right.
Now, the tabernacle has a very specific purpose. It is the tabernacle for the testimony. The testimony is placed in a box. The box of the testimony contains a testimony. So you have a testimony in a box, which is a box for the testimony, in a tent, which is a tent for the box for the, you see? Now it's all about the testimony. Now the ark is central. Think about it. This is, if someone were to find the ark, people would be, can you imagine? CNN might not cover it, but others would. No, I'm just joking. That was just a bad joke. Sorry. But that there would be a hysteria in the media. Everyone, every camera, if you discovered the Ark of the Covenant. Can you imagine this beautiful box? It's made by those who are filled with the Spirit of God. It's a box, but it's covered in gold. And on top of the box, there are these two cherubim, angelic beings, I guess, and their wings are stretched out, touching one another on the top of the box. And there are rings on the sides of the box. And through the rings, there are poles, and all of this acacia is covered in gold. It's the most beautiful. Can you imagine if the wrong person touches it? Uzziah is killed. And yet, Jeremiah said something about that too.
Right.
And then somebody, I want to bring up a point somebody asked on chat.
Okay. Go ahead.
It's in Isaiah 56:6 about, if, I guess it's talking about the sacrifices. And, yeah. I will bring them also to my holy mountain and make them rejoice in my house of prayer. Their ascent offerings and their sacrifices they shall offer up for acceptance on my altar. For my house should be called a house of prayer.
Yep.
For all peoples.
Yep.
So that's saying.
Yep. They'll have sacrifice. Yep. Now the question becomes: is that forever and always?
Yeah, that's.
See,
I guess that's
so
what they're asking.
Again, the point is that you have, and this is my view. The point is that you have what appears to be intermediate things. Let me ask you this: whenever you look at all of these things that we're talking about, whether it's temple or sacrifices or the monarchy, what is the ultimate goal? What is it that ultimately will be? Now, people say, so again, the question, I'm not going to let people off easy on this.
Okay.
If you need sacrifice, you either need that or you don't need that.
Yeah.
If you need that, what have we been doing for 2,000 years? This is the question that people have already answered. But why would we then say, oh, wait a minute. Again, these are my views.
Okay.
I mean, I've been called many things. But the idea is that maybe, just maybe, when you begin to look at things, you begin to see what is actually required versus what is desired versus whose desire is it, kind of thing. So if the Torah, if the tabernacle or the temple, if the central piece of furniture is not the right word, but let's just say that, if the central object is the ark which contains the testimony, and then you have Jeremiah chapter 3, that it says this in verse 15, and I will give you shepherds according to my heart, who shall feed you with knowledge and understanding. And it will come to pass when you are multiplied and increased in the land, this hadn't happened yet, in those days, saith Jehovah, they will no more say, the ark of the covenant of Jehovah. It's not going to come out of their mouth. Neither shall it come to mind, neither shall they remember it, neither shall they miss it, neither shall it be made anymore. At that time, Jerusalem will be called the throne of Jehovah. Who's sitting on the throne? So Zechariah 14:9 describes a day. It says, and in that day, Jehovah will be king over all the earth. Right. He will be one and his name one. Right. Well, that's not the case yet. But it still pushes that into the forefront to think about.
Robin and Jack had a good response to all those verses that were being brought up about the sacrifices. And his point in all the verses is that heart. Does
Robin and Jack say in all the verses? Because it's
in all, I guess
in the verses where he says, yeah,
heart and action both have to be pleasing.
Yeah.
In the verses where he says offerings, prayers, etc. are abominable, it's where they have no love for him or their fellow man.
Right.
And that's where the heart thing, that's what I keep saying. It's like where Jeremiah's talking about, nobody's going to need for somebody to teach him because everybody's going to know Jehovah. And the hearts have to be turned to him. The hearts are changed somehow.
Yeah. And there is this view, everyone knows it because this is the view people have taken to heart is they said, well, we don't have sacrifices now, but we will have them again. Everything will be restored the way it ought to be.
Hopefully at some point.
At some point, we'll bring back in the sacrifices, and that's going to bring back the glorious, whatever. And I wasn't being nonchalant. I mean, just that's going to bring a happily ever after. That ultimately, sacrifices will be reinstated, and people will bring their sacrifices. Now, the idea generally, sacrifices is a deep subject, not just what I'm saying, which most people don't agree with.
Religions around it.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of ancient religions. But the idea that one needs that. Yeah. And so what they say is, well, what God is very critical of through the prophets is they're bringing sacrifices, but their heart's not right. Whereas if their heart was right and they brought sacrifices, then that would be cool. But my question becomes, do we have examples where a person has his heart right, has communion with God, and sacrifices are not part of that? And my point, one of the points in the story of Noah is that before he ever kills the first animal, at least according to the text, what we have is that he's identified as righteous and whole in his generations, in his life cycles. I do see, my view from my study is that there are intermediate stages. Yes, there is war. And yes, there are rules of war in the Torah. If you look at Exodus 20, Deuteronomy 20, I'm sorry. When you go in, you offer peace. And if they don't, then you wipe them out. Okay. You go, well, that's a good instruction.
And if you elect you a king, or if you decide the king's going to be over you, here's what that king's going to do. And that's what happens.
That's right.
There's certain.
So here's what
it affects. If you want.
That's right. So the Torah says, if you're gonna have war, if you go to war, do this. Well, what do you do with that when there's no war?
Right.
I mean, what do you do with Deuteronomy 20? Does it become superfluous? Does it become? is
What
there
happens first is my question. Is there no war, or the result becomes no war?
cause or effect? Yeah. Well, ultimately, there is a change. Now, that doesn't mean, I mean, I'm a fairly literal Bible guy.
Yeah.
You know, like I always say. So I'm not countering what I use as a rule. I want to read the text. I want to understand the text. And I do want to consider the, as people call it, the whole counsel. But I also want to think about, what is it that God, if you were to ask the Creator, what is it that you really want? Do you want a sacrifice? Do you want 1,000 rams? Do you want 10,000 rivers of oil? Should I give my firstborn? Should, for the sin of my body, for my soul, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? He says, here's what I wanted. Jeremiah 7 is pretty clear. There are other places. Now, what people generally do, and this is leading me to really develop this into the class that I want to teach, but what people generally do is they say, well, the heart wasn't right, but when the heart's right, it'd be okay to do it. Ultimately, I don't think that's the case. Now, here's the thing with the covenant today. My main point was that you don't have to strictly follow the template as we sometimes do, although that can be wonderfully instructive. Don't ever mistake what I'm saying.
Sure.
But then
It's
whenever
been a
you
useful
look
tool,
at,
you know,
yeah,
a lot of, I know when I was in Christianity, there were a lot of Christians that want to study these festivals, and I mean, they just felt like it brought them closer to God.
yeah,
Maybe it's a tool there.
yeah.
Basically.
So I do think that when you look at these things, there are certain allowances that are made, but ultimately they will not be in effect.
Yeah. It seems like man always makes the wrong decision, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it just
Now again, I recognize. Yeah. Again, the point that I would sort of wrap my crazy point up with.
I don't think it's crazy at all.
I
really
know,
don't.
but you and I have spent too much time together in the desert and sun.
Yeah,
We are both crazy. That doesn't necessarily mean just because something I say that.
I don't know if it was anything in the water, because there wasn't a whole lot of water there.
That's right.
Plenty of drinking water,
But I think my views, I'm not alone. I think there are other people who've read some of these stories that see in Scripture things that go beyond what you read and point to a better day. Okay.
And there are so many questions. I know that some of them are being brought up about, is it possible that, you know, when God was walking with Adam and Eve in the garden, did he give them these instructions? And, you know, Cain and Abel, how did they know to give a sacrifice? I mean, Betty's saying that too. You know, it's like, I don't recall that Noah was commanded to bring a sacrifice. And she brings up, what about Cain and Abel? You know, why they feel they need to bring a sacrifice. There aren't those instructions.
something about the ground being cursed, I think.
Well, so to that point, I'll just say that it's complex. It is complex, and it puts me.
But it's so simple, it's ridiculous.
And it puts me in a position.
Really
that just applying simplicity to it. What would be the point
of what?
The sacrifices, the slaughtering. What would be the point if we are walking like we are supposed to be near to him? What would be the point?
Yeah. And then building on that, in my mind, I say, if there is a way to achieve that closeness without the slaughter, and that does seem to be the final picture we get, at least as far as I can tell, then what good does it do in the intermediate period? But again, I see intermediate stages.
Sure. I mean, it could be an idea that that, because there's a lot of people pushing this sacrifice, this temple stuff, and the could it be possible that that's attempted and it fails? I mean, do we finally get it in our head that doesn't matter in God's eyes? I mean, because right now we think it does matter. So a lot of people do anyway. I'm just saying.
Jeremiah said, stop saying the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord are these,
Right,
is it an excuse? Yeah. Is it an excuse to do what we do?
Sure.
Eat what we eat, get away with what we can get away with. Me, personally, it hits me as death. It's death, but he's not about death.
No,
but
it's about life.
I need to study that out for a long time. But death, it's death. It's death.
Yeah.
He's not about death. He's about life.
That's right.
But then see, that's I've struggled with that too, and it seems like our human perspective can be so focused on earth. And I know this sounds like that dualism thing, like, earth and afterlife is better. But in the economy of things, we all die. I mean, this flesh is going to die someday, So if you look at it from that perspective, like everything's going to die. I know that the Native Americans have a philosophy of, this could be a good day to die, because their focus wasn't just on the physical existence. And I'm not saying I don't agree with you about this earth is great and good and wonderful.
You never have to agree with me.
No, and while I'm on this earth, I love it. I want to enjoy it. I want to do my part, to do whatever.
If you find something wrong, fix it.
But if animals, being sacrificed and killed, it sounds horrible, but how do we know that it is horrible? If it's done in a humane way, that they just accept it, and it's not a horrible thing.
I don't think the knife can be sharp enough. I'm just being honest with you.
No, you didn't see Coal Mountain. I always think about that old lady. Yeah, that raised her goats, and when she was gonna cook something to save this man to nourish his body, she loved her goat, and she didn't know spoke to it, and she honored its life, and as she was talking to it about how it served its purpose, and it's such a good goat, and she slit its throat, and it was done like that,
The question becomes why?
Yeah.
I mean, it really does. Now, I know that what we have is we have this incredible book of wonderful stories. But within this book are all the stories good?
The bad, and the ugly, right there.
It really does contain many, many things. The people are not always doing what's right.
Hardly ever are.
Yeah, Jodell has a good point too.
What's
about
that?
Choosing. Deuteronomy gives a choice between life and death, with a command to choose life. If sacrifices deal with death, then it's likely a strong parable for the consequences of choosing death.
And so object lessons along the way. I give you an example. So in the book of Numbers, the children of Israel are fed miraculously from heaven. And they're fed. What are they fed?
Manna from heaven.
They're fed manna from heaven.
What do they want?
And they really desire something else. They desire flesh.
He gives it to them.
Until it comes out their nose. Now, Betty asked a moment ago if anyone was familiar with Rav Kook's writings. Rav Kook wrote some things about the ideal of vegetarianism, and I'm not pushing that. That's not my point in this. But he took this prophetic view that ultimately that's not what God truly needs, wants, or desires. And so that becomes the question. If we say, for instance, that this is what God really wants. Now, has anyone ever heard someone speak about what God wants? Yes. I mean, the world has been full of these reports. Jeremiah said that in his day there were a lot of false prophets going around, and they were advocating, "Thus saith the Lord." We have that today. I mean, we really do.
What is God's perfect will?
Yeah.
For your life, whatever they throw that in there.
Okay, so to your point about being stewards of the earth and the soil and the curse on the soil and all of this, and I'm thinking about animals dying and animals that we love, our pets.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so a few years ago we had our beloved Tipper had cancer, and we held on to him as long as we could, but it came to that point where he died because of the cancer. Well, the cancer, to me, I see so many dogs getting cancer now and tumors and all this, and it's got to be the consequence of our bad stewardship, how everything's interrelated with the chemicals that we put in our bodies, the chemicals we put in our animals' bodies, the chemicals that are in the air, the things that are done out of ignorance because people are either greedy or ignorant.
Yeah, I fed that dog a lot of peppermint candy, Sherry.
Well,
I'm just saying.
bad peppermint candy had chemicals in it, Dave.
Yeah. I know, that's what I'm saying.
The thing is,
it might have been Dave.
What about those heartworm preventatives and all those things that we had to put in our dog's body that I'm sure contributed to that cancer? I have no doubt about it. But it's a consequence of us not getting that everything's interrelated, from the soil to the earth to the air to our actions, our integrity or lack of it, walking in God's ways. And I'm seeing that more than I'm talking to myself here, because I'm seeing more dealing with earth and soil and sustainability, how it all interrelates.
Betty, just for sake of time, I'm not avoiding, I am familiar. I saw Lorna also posted. It's not only Ezekiel 43 and so forth that deal with this, but there are other passages also which describe rebuilding a temple and sacrifices and so forth. So the standard view is the one that everyone already has, most people. And that is, yes, we're going to build it. And a lot of them will base that because there's a clear command that goes all the way back to Exodus 25 and 8 in that. Build for me a mikdash, a sanctuary. Now, in that time of the Torah, it was a tent. And then later, you remember the story in 2 Samuel 7. David said, look, I'm staying in a house of cedar and God's in a tent. I guess I need to go build him a better house. And God said, who's really building who a house?
I got a foot throne. That's what he's saying.
Yeah. So
Wait, what was it? Like a flip throne?
A foot throne.
Oh.
What do you think that's?
A flip throne. I was like,
you were
too much in it.
I think
Technology.
I think my main point is twofold. There are two periods of time that I'm really concerned with. All right. One is the present.
Yeah.
One is the present. How can we, as students of Scripture and seekers after Yehovah, how can we best serve Him?
Amen.
And what should we focus on?
Absolutely.
Now, if we say, well, we could offer sacrifices. No, you can't. Not according to the rules in place. You can't right now. You can't. And if that's not my focus now, I'm not saying others shouldn't or couldn't or wouldn't focus, because there are people focused on getting that done now. My job is not to criticize those efforts. It's not my place. I just said my place, as I see it, is to think about right now. There is no central place of worship to bring sacrifices anyway.
That's right.
So you don't do it. I mean, not now.
That can't be done.
Can't be done. You cannot do that now. What can you do? Now, which brings up a question. What do you do if all of it, what do you do for Yom Kippur? I mean, oh my gosh, I have to bring, there's a ceremony and there are these two goats and you bring one, they're just alike, and one is La Adonai, and one is La Azazel, and one is taken to the wilderness, the other is killed, and you can't do any of that. Is there an element of Yom Kippur that we can do? Yeah. Make yourself low.
Do you think that it is kind of like one of those special appointed times where we actually can, look in our hearts and ask Jehovah, what is it that I need to get right? What's
He's
not
shown
right?
us.
Yeah.
He's shown
What
us.
is it, particularly in my, myself?
Oh, yeah. No, it's a time of self-reflection. It clearly is.
Yeah.
So you look at Yom Kippur, you look at this particular time. You look at this particular time, and so
well, no, I'm talking about like a hyper window of opportunity to be more sensitive. Because, it should be a daily walk, no doubt.
So to Lorna's point, and everyone who's bringing up these texts about, well, what about this? What about that? Let me make, this is my point. I know those. No, I wasn't. I'm not being. It sounds like that, but I get excited. These chapters, I know these chapters. Sure, I know what they say, and they deserve attention. Everyone gives them attention.
I know you've turned over these rocks looking,
but I'm still doing it. Oh, I'm not quitting. I'm looking at it deeply. But here's the thing. This is my final point, my final. I'm looking at two things, now and the very end. I also see in the midst of that other stops along the way. Right now, you cannot offer sacrifices. What do you then do? How then can we approach God? I just read some of those passages. Now, if a temple goes up next week as quick as a 7-Eleven is built, it's a different story maybe for some people. Then you have to say, oh, well, now we have it. Now what do we do? That question is not on my horizon right now. If ultimately you see passages which say they will not hurt or slaughter in all my holy mountain, my question would be, the people that want me to answer Isaiah 40 through 48, you answer that one. And maybe together we come up with the answer. Because I see ultimately there is no sacrifice. God does not desire. Lo zavak. What God desires? Hesed. Velo zavak. And not sacrifice. Now people go, yeah, but if your heart's right, velo zavak. Go and study what this means. But here's what we've done instead. The reason I take these words to heart and head, we've not studied those words. What we've studied is, but right. What about this? But what about that? But what about velo zavak?
That is so true.
Isaiah 51, Psalm 51:17, David writes, the sacrifices of God are a broken spirit, a broken and contrite heart, O God, you will not despise. Sure. And I think
sacrifice something. There you go.
I think that as we look at now, someone has to come up with now. Now, what has happened is Rabbinic Judaism, people might criticize, but think about what they've done. They said, what do we do now? And they look at things that we can do in the here and now that don't require sacrifices. They look at those passages which say you don't need that. And that's how they built this.
Look at the what I say the hand of God is the Jewish people haven't been able to build a temple. They haven't been able to accomplish it. I mean, it's like what?
Okay.
What?
So if I can say something, Betty said, yeah, she agrees. Like I said, it is the bottom line. It's the Shema. Love the Lord your God with all your heart. I like what Temple Grandin said when they asked her about what is love to you. And she said, well, it's not a feeling, it's caring. So if we care about Jehovah, we're going to consider and study. Like you said, Hesed is one, study is the other, because you got to know and work this out, seek it out. What do you want from me? What do you desire? Yeah. But your heart has to be care. You got to care about what he thinks and what he says and what he desires and what he requires.
Yeah.
So it's a twofold thing.
It
you gotta
is.
study and you gotta care.
And I don't doubt for 1 minute that people who hold opposing views to me, I don't suggest nor do I doubt that they care about God.
Right.
That is not my point.
No.
I in no way am meaning to insult, ridicule, or suggest that other people don't have a desire to serve God.
We learned that a long time ago.
We did.
It doesn't work.
And
it doesn't serve any purpose.
That's right.
That's the best way to put it. It's fruitless to do that.
But you know what, Dave? When I see people who are opposed to what I'm learning or thinking, and they are so dogmatic and not loving, a red flag goes off immediately, and I say, they may have part of it, but they don't have all of it.
Yeah, and to this very subject, there are people, dear people, who are righteous people who love God and seek to serve Him with every breath they take. And their greatest desire is to restore a temple and to reinstate sacrifices. My point is not to criticize that sincerity. My question is, as theirs is, by the way, but what do you do now? So if there are people out there who say, well, I want to put all my effort into doing that, it's not my job to take away from that. It's my job to say, okay, and my job is to say, I'm focused on right now, and what does it look like because right now we are faced with, this is the key to me, we are faced with an opportunity to live our lives now as they will be in the very far future.
It's close.
Someone said, well, your view is way, way out. Well, when do you think that they're going to be sacrifices?
Some people
I know we've had a client that we were talking to about this. He's born Jewish, but he's not a practicing Jew anymore. And, it's like, well, here's what I believe. This is going to happen, and people are going to be surprised. And he says, yeah, but that's thousands of years from now. He's happy just to not worry about it for now. But
building the temple and doing reinstating sacrifices is a step. I think it's a step. It's their next step, and that's, I think
I agree
the
with
idea
you, Ross.
that what we do now is important. It's hard to say. I'm torn between. It looked like God's hands in not allowing that to happen, and it shouldn't happen because I see the end game also. It's not going to happen in the future. Why worry about it now?
Yeah. Well, there,
like Noah.
Yeah.
Be like Noah.
Be like Noah.
Yeah.
It's faith, Dave.
Yeah.
It's
no,
faith.
I mean,
it's a matter of faith. It really is.
It's driving all of us.
Christianese would say that's going to burn up anyway. That's what it would say.
On the earth?
Yeah, it's all going to burn up anyway. Don't worry about
it.
If anything, God's going to say, Noah, build a fire suit.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I'm not laughing at that.
No, I understand.
I'm just saying it's important. It's important. It is.
We have some intermediate periods of time. I'll give you an example. In Micah chapter 4, it says that all people will walk each in the name of his own God. But we will walk in the name of Jehovah our God.
There you go.
All right. Now, is that the ideal? Is the ideal that everyone's walking in the name of his own God? Because that's the view that some people are putting on me.
There is no God.
Yeah. So that view that everyone's walking about in there. But then I have Zechariah who says, and in that day, Jehovah will be one and his name one. But what happened to, but wait a minute. No, Ross, you're forgetting. Scripture says everybody will walk about in the name of his own God. Well, when you consider the end game, so should I teach people the names of all other gods? Because I have a prophetic verse that says, everyone here, you can walk in the name of your God. Here's your God.
Here they are. Pick them.
Yeah, but what's the consequences of that?
Okay.
Come on.
So, in other words, my view needs to be from a scriptural prophetic picture. What do I focus on now? And how does that relate to the end game? This is just the way I think. I apologize if it doesn't relate very well.
I'm saying be a Noah.
But
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I want to hear what you're saying.
even if we have intermediate periods where there are people who are walking about in their own game, or in their own God's name, in their own game, that ultimately is not going to be the case. Though right now, many people call on God in many different ways.
They do.
At this point, not everyone knows Jehovah, but Jeremiah 31, there is a covenant coming where it says they will no longer need someone to teach them, saying, know Jehovah, for they will all know him, from the least of them to the greatest.
I think there's going to be some along the way that do have that. I don't think, it doesn't necessarily say everybody at once is all of a sudden going to have this. It doesn't say that.
Yeah. My challenge to people then is this: at the present, at now, today, like the old preachers used to say, do you know beyond a shadow of a doubt? At today, now, how do you draw near unto God? With sacrifices, with 10,000 rams, or with 1,000 rams, with 10,000 rivers of oil? He's shown you what is good. Ma tov. And what does God really seek from you all time? Love, chesed.
That's right.
It's this idea, because hesed is what he really desires, velo zavak, and not sacrifice. I mean, there are many, many passages that people can bring up, but I'm asking people to think about this. And the point today, if it didn't relate well, that the thought that's driving me is this deeper study I'm working on about this prophetic vision of what the world looks like, and even what does the quote-unquote Torah look like? Because we have things in the Torah that we have prophets saying that's not even going to be remembered.
That's right.
And so if that's the case, I'm not trying to write that Torah for God. That's not my job. But at the same time, focus on those things.
There was a point, this might help a little bit. I know it helps me. There was a point where all the languages, everybody spoke the same language, and they understood each other. And even though we speak the same language, we still struggle with understanding each other. It's almost like there's a block there, a babble in our brain. That brain babble. It's like, I know you studied this through. Sometimes it's hard to get that across to me, for me to understand.
Or vice versa. You've studied
both ways. I mean, and I'm just using me as an example. That goes broadly. It goes with me and my wife. We have trouble sometimes understanding what we're saying to each other, even though we speak the same language.
I tell you all the time, you're not hearing what I'm saying.
Yeah, you don't hear what I'm saying.
But that's a great point. Language, the communication of words is one thing, whether written or spoken. And then the thing that we are really all trying to do is get beyond the word to the heart of the matter. We really are, if you think about it, we have this passage in Isaiah. His ways are higher than our ways. His thoughts are our thoughts. But we do get glimpses.
Sure.
We do get glimpses throughout the text which seem to indicate that element where God is communicating to mankind. And he may, in other words, there are things that someone might say in a relationship. We tolerate certain things from people. Bridget tolerates things from me. But there are times where she'll say, listen, when you do this, this is the way it comes across. We don't even agree on how to load the dishwasher. Now, the good thing is she's in California most of the time, and I don't enjoy loading the dishwasher, but I enjoy loading it my way.
I got you.
Because for whatever reason, after 31 years together, I start on the right and work my way left. She can't stand that, and I have watched the woman go in behind me and redo it. It's like compulsive behavior.
That thing turns a certain way. That little thing that washes it.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
But I think that's a silly example. But whenever we think about what is it that we do that sometimes may not be pleasing to the one we're seeking to serve. And there are things that we think, hey, you want me to wash the dishes. Well, I want you to wash them a certain way.
I can drive down the highway with my blinker on, drive Sherry crazy.
That's because you can't hear it.
Look, Joe Dale says, why do I hear Sinatra in the background? I was thinking more Elvis. I did it my way. So anyway, there are some wonderful things. Scripture contains these beautiful, look, if it were really easy and it were very easily spelled out and the end from the beginning, see, I love that phrase too. But whenever you think about everything that's going on, and you think about the complexity and the total amount of material that we have here, it's not resolved yet. People are still debating these things. The Jewish people have debated them for thousands of years, and they have a record of some of those debates in their religious material. Christians have debated, and Christians and Jews have debated one another. And what I'm trying to do is, outside of that debate, go straight back to the text and discern what is it that's contained within these fiery, inspired words containing the good, the bad, and the ugly. I mean, it contains stories that, you know, if someone says, look, everything in there is inspired, but what if someone went to Job's friends for their information on how to interact with God? And they said, it's in the scripture. It's right here. It says, that's what his wife said. So there are things in the Bible
the
that
his friends gave him seems to be good. I mean, hey, it makes sense.
Job.
You realize,
they look at Job and they go, maybe you have some hidden sin in your life. And
meanwhile,
behind the scene, the reader knows that God has told the adversary, have you considered Job? He's upright in his generation. And yet your friends will tell you, but
that's in the Bible.
We have a scripture in the Bible that if you do this, your heavens are going to be brass, and you're not going to get rain. That's what it is. You have sin in your life. Oh, wait a minute, your basket goes out empty and comes back empty. Your wine vat, you're under a curse. You have a generational curse. We have scripture.
There's sin in the camp.
Look, people have used scripture to advocate slavery, and they've used it to liberate slaves.
People, to control women.
Absolutely. People have used it to put women in a quiet place and used it for women's rights. People have used it to advance, you name it. Now, here's what else. People have used it to advocate rebuilding the temple, and people have used it to suggest otherwise. Now, what does that mean? It means that I seek to bring all of those people together, the countering views, the views that are like mine. I love it when people go, hey, that's a good point, Ross. But you know what I love better? When someone says, I just don't see it, because what do you do about this verse? Then I have to go, oh, man, I have to go back and look. If I wanted everybody around me to agree with me, I would be hard pressed. I really would.
Rebuilding the temple plan. I guarantee. I'm just saying.
I can't find one person who totally agrees with everything, and it pleases me deeply. So when I say things, these are my insights. These are my views. I promise you, those who know me best know this. I'm not saying that I want you to rush over and accept my view. I'm expecting you. I'm asking you, I'm begging you, prove it wrong. Now, what I've done here is said, I'm talking about right now, what do you do? Right now, what do you do? I think I'm fairly straight on, but it doesn't mean I have it all figured out. I'm working on things 10, 12 hours a day, sometimes more, where I'm wrestling with certain topics because I want to make sure that I'm presenting things as best I can, as accurately as I can. But I have people around me who are very knowledgeable.
You can bet that you're not alone in this, but it's going to feel like you are. I guarantee you that. That's biblical.
Yep, that's right.
But there's other people.
It is fun to do this, and it's exciting, and it's informative and educational, and I never want to lose that. I don't want to ever get to the place where I just close the book. I hope that I live to be 120, but I don't want to close the book sometime and say, I got it. I got it. Because it would ruin the fun that I have every day. And I would hope that you have that love and desire to seek out the deep things of God And the only way to do that is by challenging at times the status quo. We have to be willing to entertain ideas that run counter to the religious establishments of our day. Let me tell you something. You all, none of you, would be here listening to me right now, especially after 3 hours or 4 hours or whatever it is, if you had accepted the status quo. You're here because you're a thinker, because you desire truth, and you want to know beyond anything else. So I think, to Cindy's point, this is why we are here to assemble, to let our iron sharpen each other's iron. We all have a piece of this, but have to work together and not bash each other. And that's true. And I try to be respectful, and I want people to be respectful back. I'm okay if they're not, but that's the whole point.
For the most part, here, you got a pretty good choir.
Yep.
It's a group of people. I think, I think we understand what you're saying as a group, and I can be a part of that group. I think. And
even if you don't agree, you can be part of the group. The thing that bothers me the most, if you say, what hurts you? Because I like to think I'm fairly tough. But what hurts me is when somebody says, I can't sit under that. Yeah. I can't be there anymore because you don't align with everything.
Come back with, I don't want to sit on anybody either. Yeah. You don't want to sit on anybody. Yeah. Come on.
I don't want to hold sway.
You're not sitting on people.
I want people to be their own voice. And as Joe Dale pointed out, people have to work through these things on their own. And don't listen just to me or to any of you or to Joe Dale or to James Tabor. We're all in this together. We're all seeking truth, and we're looking at the most wonderful assemblage of material that's ever been comprised. If you think about it, the Bible continues to be the bestseller on the planet. People love it, and I love it. So that's it. I have spoken my piece, and hopefully people have gained from it at least a little better understanding, and at least it's going to make people go back and look at some of these things that we talked about. But did I say?
And I know you're going to do the same thing.
I am. Isaiah 59. Isaiah 59:21. One of my favorite verses about covenant. Because you go, what is God's covenant? I mean, ultimately, you have all these covenants, but what is God's covenant?
Big old word.
Yep. Verse 21, Isaiah 59. And as for me, this is my covenant with them, saith Jehovah. My spirit that is upon you, and my words which I put in your mouth shall not depart out of your mouth, nor out of the mouth of your seed, nor out of the mouth of your seed, saith Jehovah, from henceforth and forever. His covenant is made up of the spirit that he puts upon you and the words he puts within your mouth. Shabbat shalom. Shavua tov.
Shavua tov, y'all.